What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I tried the assassin job in the Ragnarok game. In addition to that, I also tested out the two builds available for this class, which are the double dagger and Qatar builds. At the end of this video, I will be providing my honest assessment between the two builds and tell which build is more suitable in the early and mid stages of this game. The first thing that I can tell you about this job is that, man, out of all the jobs that I've tried, this is probably the slowest class to reach the second job. Unlike the other jobs or the other classes, like the swordsman or mage, which have burst skills that I can 1 or 2 hit monsters with while grinding, the thief doesn't have any skill similar to that. The only viable skill that the thief can use is the double attack, which is not really the most efficient, nor the fastest skill to eliminate monsters in the wild. The reason for this is the low trigger rate of the double attack skill. In my opinion, the best way to trigger this skill is to have a very fast attack speed in order to have more chances in activating this skill. However, as we all know, attack speed builds in this game, especially in the early to mid stages, are not really the most ideal build to play because of how the system works. Having a burst skill will always have an advantage over jobs that relies heavily on their normal attacks. From my experience playing the other jobs, I can usually reach the second job within the day. However, when I played the thief, I had to add an extra day before I was able to become an assassin. Another disadvantage for the thief while grinding is that it is only a melee class, which requires you to chase around the monsters that you are targeting. So being in an area with range class such as the archer, mage, or even the priest really made my grind a lot harder and a lot longer. I even tried using the other skills of the thief, however, none of those skills can 1 or 2 hit a monster. You really have to rely heavily on the double attack skill for the whole duration of your grind. I even tried adding more agi stat over the strength stat in my build, however, the attack speed doesn't really go a lot faster, especially when you don't have the right cards to complement your build. On top of that, since I relied heavily on the agi stat, the damage of my normal attack struggled because of the lack of strength. So it is really hard to find a common ground when it comes to starting off as a thief, especially when you don't have the item nor the cards to help your build. But I still pushed through as I really want to experience the second job for the thief, which is the assassin. So after I reached the assassin job, I tested out the dagger build first, since I already know that this build will still rely heavily on normal attacks and the double attack skill. I didn't want to use my skill reset item before I test out the Qatar build. Unfortunately, the double dagger build did not really improve that much from what I was experiencing as a thief. The double attack doesn't always trigger, so I have to deal normal attacks to monsters in the wild, which really makes that build inefficient and slow when it comes to grinding. It did increase a little bit of damage since I am no longer using a shield. However, in order to eliminate monsters in a faster rate, you really need to trigger or activate the double attack skill. Even if I use the smear poison skill to make my weapon attribute to poison, it doesn't really add enough damage wherein I can easily eliminate monsters at a faster rate. It still gives you the slow grinding vibe that you experience as a thief. On top of that, I really struggled completing dungeons with that build. I had to use a lot of my potions just to survive, especially when I am being mobbed by normal monsters. Even when I was inside the Endless Tower, I struggled to clear the lower floors. At the same time, daggers are only strong against small-sized monsters, so you will have a size penalty against medium and large monsters in the game. From those experiences alone, I can easily say that using the double dagger build in this stage of the game is not really ideal, especially if you are an F2P like me. you will struggle really hard when it comes to grinding and leveling up in this game. Maybe in the later stages of the game, or in future patches, this build might be viable, but with the current patch and stage of the Ragnarok game, this is not really the best build to play. With that being said, what I've experienced with the double dagger build is the polar opposite of the Qatar build. The main reason for this is when you are using a Qatar, you will be able to use one of the most famous, if not the most well-known skill of an assassin in any Ragnarok game, and that is the Sonic Blow skill. This skill is one of the most popular skills in the game. At the same time, this skill has a very short cooldown, which means that you can easily spam the Sonic Blow skill while grinding, which is a huge advantage in my opinion, because the Sonic Blow is a burst damage skill which can easily 1 or 2 hit a monster in the wild. It has the same cooldown time as the bash skill of a knight, which means that this is going to be the meta build for the assassin, as the skill is an insta burst at the same time a spammable skill in the game. It is also strong against medium-sized enemies, which means that this is also viable in PvP. Another thing that's great with this skill is that it can trigger critical damage, so you can easily identify your required stats, which are the agility and luck, as this build relies heavily on the burst and critical damage. Do note that the Sonic Blow skill in the Ragnarok scales up with the agility stat, unlike other Ragnarok IPs, where this skill scales up with the strength stat. You don't really need to have strength for this build, as your main goal is to spam the Sonic Blow skill as much as possible in order to eliminate the monsters. And that is why I had to change my build not only for the skills, but for the stats as well. As you can see in this video, I can easily eliminate monsters in the wild, as compared to when I was using the double dagger build. I mean, if you compare it side by side, the Sonic Blow is guaranteed to hit the target and deal a huge amount of damage, versus the double attack, which has a very low trigger rate, which can sometimes lead to a slower time to kill when it comes to grinding monsters in the game. When it comes to the damage, the difference between the double dagger and Qatar build are night and day, especially when the critical damage triggers in your Sonic Blow. You can easily see the difference when I am clearing dungeons and floors of the Endless Tower. I also would like to try out the crit build for the assassin, as this is probably one of the most popular builds from the classic Ragnarok days. Unfortunately, for players who love the classic assassin crit build, that type of build doesn't really bode well in the early to mid stages of this game. You will require a huge amount of investment when it comes to building an assassin crit build. Maybe you can grind that build out even without spending money in the game. However, I'm not really so sure about that, because I feel like it requires a lot of high-level cards as well as high progression equipments in order to pull out the crit build. Maybe I'm wrong, but for now, with the current state of the game, that build is not really recommended at the moment. Another reason why I feel like an assassin is not really an F2P friendly class, especially if you are aiming to be a competitive player in this game, is that it is really squishy and it is a melee class. So basically, you are on the front lines in combat, and yet you are not really as tanky as the other jobs. Which is why I really do think that you need to have good cards and good equipment progression if you want to be a competitive assassin player in this game. Although, that may all change, especially when the third class comes out, wherein you can use more skills from the assassin cross job. But that might not happen anytime soon, as I'm sure that the game will prioritize implementing the alternative jobs first. So for now, I will highly recommend using the Qatar build in the early and mid stages of the game, as this build is the more efficient between the two, and you can easily grind and farm more with this build. Let me know your thoughts about the assassin job in the Ragnarok game. You can write it down in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like, and if you want to see more the Ragnarok content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. GG.
You're a superhero.